is the, I made myself in charge of marketing over that. And here's the language that I'm using to market it. On August 26th, we're going to have a gathering of the entrepreneurial community of Boston. On the occasion of Demo Day for One Semester Startup, in which there'll be 10 6-minute presentations. Plus, wait, there's more. Thanks to the Technology Entrepreneurship Society, we're going to have a special presentation, actually an interview of Dr. T, the founder and CEO of National Instruments, at the event. So you all come. And everyone here, I hope, will go to the Eventbrite. Where can we find the Eventbrite?
1ssspring.eventbrite.com.
Is that working now?
Yes.
1SS Spring.
Josh changed it.
1SS Spring 2012.
No, just 1SS Spring. Yes, it used to be that Josh decided to change the URL to something more readable.
Sorry.
So that I could just say it like that.
Yes.
Instead of blurting it out, where can we find it? Is it posted somewhere like in Facebook?
It's about to be on Facebook.
It's on Facebook.
Yeah. Okay. It was buried, but yeah, put it back at the top.
Do we sign up as entrepreneurs or as students?
Nobody will come.
Just sign up.
Okay.
And encourage your friends to come. The auditorium is virtually infinite. So if you have a friend of a friend of a friend who might come, have them register. The key is to have them register because we're going to buy them food. You don't register on one end.
Your silky hair. He had to hug it.
Okay, now I have your attention, and maybe, I don't know, Noah Kagan got away with telling you all to close your computers. I don't know if I can get away with that, because what I'm about to attempt is very difficult for me. And by the way, if you're going to talk during my presentation, I'm going to get really upset. What I'm about to do is very difficult, and it will require your help. I'm going to try to sell you selling. And this is making good on a promise that's been made, because the promise of One Semester Startup is that we're going to help you accelerate your companies by sharing with you some wisdom on various topics, one of which is selling. And this is my effort to make good on that promise, which is to share with you some insights into selling. In fact, here's some promises I want to make about tonight. I want to convince you as to the importance and complexity and some how-to of selling. 3 things. How important it is, how complex it is, and how to do some of it. I'm going to talk about the Zen and the art of selling, 4 levels of consciousness in selling, which is sort of a personal history that I went through in learning selling. I'm going to talk about the nerds and the suits, the importance of their reconciliation. I'm going to talk about some selling technologies. Selling is a highly complicated field that has technologies in it. You have to learn how to use depending on what role you're going to play. I'm going to convince you that the customer is not always right. I'm going to tell you the story of Metcalfe's Law, which is a sales and marketing story. I'm going to talk about shifting of gears in selling as the company grows. I'm going to talk about the evolution of your company and the marketplace over time, the difference between sales and marketing, how to ask for the order, how to remember to stop talking. The 2 secrets to selling I'm going to share with you tonight. I have no extra charge. Those are listening and promising. Listening and promising. And then I'm going to try to convince you to practice selling every day, starting today. So those are that's what I'm going to try to do, and it'll take about, I estimate, 2 hours with a break in the middle. So we'll be done well before 9, and we'll have a break in the middle. Any questions? I'd love a question just to get the ball rolling. Anyone have a question yet?
What's the first thing you ever sold?
It was a subscription to Reader's Digest.
Good.
That's one I remember. I sold subscriptions to Reader's Digest back when Reader's Digest was a really big magazine.
What's the most recent thing you've sold? I sold, I mean, not to convince people that sold. Yeah.
I've sold some stock recently. Stock in startups. Because I'm a member of an active venture capitalist who is a board member of 5 companies, and these companies from time to time raise money. And as I'm generally the lead investor in these 5 companies, so I participate in the selling of the stock. So my most recent transaction was a $10 million Q round. I don't remember what, it had a really big letter in it, but in Infinite Power Solutions, makers of thin film batteries. So we raised $10 million. After raising the $10 million, our fume date is middle October. So I have some more selling to do.
How much was the Reader's Digest subscription?
I don't remember, a few dollars. And I got a commission for it. So I sold them. I went up and down, lived in the development. I knocked on all my neighbors' doors and pitched them on. A lot of them bought these because I was their neighbor. That helps. Oh, little Bobby's here selling Reader's Digest subscriptions. I know his mom. I think I'll buy one. It's only $4 or something. Yes.
Who's the most intimidating person you've ever sold to?
The most intimidating person I've ever sold to was a supply chain manager at Texas Instruments. When you sell to big companies, a good sign that you're succeeding is they turn you over to the supply chain manager, whose job is to drain every ounce of profit out of your company. And also check to be sure that you're a reliable supplier and you test your products and all that. And this man at TI was a biological freak. He required 2 hours of sleep every night. So our team arrives in Dallas, Texas, takes us to dinner, takes us out after dinner to discuss our deal, how it's coming together. Midnight rolls around, he's still going at it. He says, you guys probably need some sleep, I'm going out ballroom dancing. So he ballroom danced from 1 to 3, and then he slept from like 3 to 5. And then he met us for breakfast at 6, and he did this for an entire week. Just ground us down. Priceless. What I did get from him is 12 million advertising impressions with my company, 3Com, co-branded with Texas Instruments. But when I came back to one thing salespeople do is when you come back to the factory, you then have to tell everybody what you've accomplished. You sold it for what? Yeah, but I got 12 million advertising impressions. So that was the most intimidating. But there's a lot of people who are in this. If they have supply chain on their business card, look out. They're tough. It's their job to grind you into the dirt. Other questions? So before we're done, I'm hoping that you'll be comfortable with the following nouns and the associated verbs. Orders are things you ask for. Objections are things that you handle. Promises are things that you keep. Credibility is something that you build. Features is something that you convert to benefits. Customers are people you listen to. Lies are things you never tell. It's okay to exaggerate a little, but it is not okay to lie. Do you know the difference between an exaggeration and a lie? It's very important. If your customer believes you and is thereby damaged, that is a lie. But if your customer believes you and things work out, that's an exaggeration.
What's the difference between sales and marketing?
I plan to get into that, but
The salespeople that know, so, yeah, the salespeople don't know that they're lying.
I'm glad you brought that up. And salespeople are only lying when their lips are moving. But the raw fact is, nothing happens until something gets sold. This applies at a personal level, in your personal life. It applies in your company. It applies, it's a profession too. There are people whose job it is to sell things. So selling occurs, engineers sell. Engineers invent things, they have to sell their ideas to their companies, their teams. Everybody's artists sell. They do a painting, they have to sell it to continue painting or else they run out of money and so on. selling is in almost everything we do. And the people who disparage, like Josh just did, salesmen, do so at their peril. Because one of the #1 failure modes, one of the major failure modes of startups is when the company is full of engineers and they don't respect salespeople, or they don't hire salespeople, or good ones, or they treat them like dirt, and the companies die. I'll elaborate on why. So as I said, there are salespeople, professional salespeople. I just spent the last 2 days on airplanes. And one of the things I love about airports is I run into road warriors, my people. These are people who are out selling. And you can tell they know how to travel. They have those roller things. And they're very nattily dressed. And they have organizers, all sorts of organizers that are always organizing and making notes. And then they have bags under their eyes. And these are my people. Those are professional salespeople. But then there's sales managers. And that's a slightly different set of skills. How do you manage salespeople? And then there are sales and marketing executives. Very high end of that food chain. Sales can be viewed as an important part of the machinery of free enterprise. You know, we have this, you've heard of this phrase, free enterprise. To some degree, we live in a free enterprise system. What does that actually mean? And it means, well, free, freedom. The acronym that I use is FOCACA. Have I told you about FOCACA before? No? Anyone speak Yiddish? It's not Yiddish. It sounds like Yiddish, because in Yiddish, kaka means shit. But FOCACA is an acronym, and it stands for Freedom of Choice Among Competing Alternatives, and it's one of the hallmarks of free enterprise, and it's where sales comes in. Because people are given the freedom to choose among competitors, and then if you're the salesperson, you have to convince them to choose you. So in a sense, this is, what I'm talking about today is how do you operate the machinery of free enterprise? How do you get it to work for you? How to get it, how to meet needs and solve problems? Now, it is a revelation to most engineers. Well, the following is, it involves a Venn diagram. Do you still use Venn diagrams? You know what a set is? So there's 3 sets in this discussion. There's a set of all people who will never buy your product no matter what, ever. That's, for example, the immediate family of your competitor. They'll never buy your product no matter what. And then there's a set of all people who will automatically buy your product as soon as it's available. That would include your mother. My mother passed on. I found in the basement the first year of my products was down in her basement, where she had carefully bought them all. That's the second set. The third set is a set of all people who will buy your products if you can competently sell to them. So the real question is, how big do you think those 3 sets are? What I'm telling you is that third set is the big one. If you competently sell, you have access to this huge set. You should not think that the world does not yield to selling. The world does yield to selling. There's a huge opportunity for people who know how to sell. So let me tell you now about a fantasy. Did you all read the paper I sent, The Zen and the Art of Selling? There's this fantasies in there. I'm going to repeat the fantasy. I'm an expert in mousetraps. I attend a conference on mousetraps, and I'm listening. Pretty smart guy. Figure out, I have an idea about how to make a better mousetrap. You've heard that phrase, make a better mousetrap. What's the expression? Build a better mousetrap and they will beat a path to your door. So at this conference, I had the idea, and I stood up and I shared the idea with everyone. And everyone said, wow, that is such a great idea, Bob. That's fantastic. And then they started to build on it and make suggestions about how to improve it. And occasionally I would have to intervene in the conversation to correct them and keep it in the right direction, my direction, about my idea. And then this idea got out into the marketplace. But I want you to know that in this fantasy, for years afterwards, every time this idea is referred to, everyone dutifully called it Bob's mousetrap idea. Because they all knew it was my idea. They gave me constant credit for it. In fact, they would mail me money whenever they sold one. They would spontaneously, without my even bothering them, they would just send me what they thought it was worth. So the money was piling up, and my this great idea that I had at this conference. And then eventually I got, really rich. Occasionally I would have to come from my island encampment. And then eventually I had so much money I started giving it away, but I want you to know I only gave it to socially responsible, environmentally sensible, politically correct organizations. And then I woke up from this fantasy because it's nothing like that. Having an idea is nothing like what I just said. That is a pure fantasy, and it relates to this build a better mousetrap and they'll be the path to your door. That is the first level of consciousness in selling, is believing that. Believing that if you build a better mousetrap, they will. Who are these people? They're just going to beat a path to your door. They just can't wait to get there if you're better at it. So I've tried this. It doesn't work very well. Nobody beats the path to your door. You end up sitting alone in the bushes, and the world passes you by. Trust me, they do not beat a path to your door. I don't know who made that up. Who said that? Who was that person? Some corrective actions required. So but that's the first level of selling consciousness, is believing that the world will beat a path to your door. But after you sit there for a while, and you decide you want to change things, you go to the second level of selling consciousness. You go out into the world and you convince people to buy your products by arguing with them. You're, of course, know more than anyone else about your product. You're full of facts about it. You go out, you knock on their doors. When they argue with you, you argue back with them. When you argue and you argue, and some of them will buy your products. And I've tried this, and it is better than sitting in the bushes alone. And but it isn't very satisfying. You will not succeed widely with this method. And the reason is, just because you win the argument doesn't mean you get the order. Remember, these customers are free to do whatever the hell they want. And just because they lose, there's no agreement in the world that says, just because I lose the argument, I have to buy your product. You can humiliate me and win the argument, and I won't buy your product because you pissed me off. So that's the second level of selling consciousness, and I went through that. IBM invited me in 1980 to argue with them about a local area network that they had called the IBM Token Ring that was competing with my invention called the mousetrap, the Ethernet. And they gave me 2 shots. They paid me $2,000 a shot to once go to New Jersey, the other go to North Carolina, and convince them to switch from the Token Ring, which was their corporate standard, and switch instead to the open standard, which would be Ethernet. I killed them. I'd been working on local area networks for 7 or 8 years by then. They had just started. There was no argument I couldn't win with them. I did not, however, adopt Ethernet. They stuck with Token Ring, and I had to fight with that for another 20 or 30 years. So that's the second level of selling consciousness. And then you move to the third. And the third level of selling consciousness is the most common one. It's where most salespeople live. It's where all the salespeople live who give selling a bad name. And this I call the suffering fools gladly. You realize that when you argue with people, it pisses them off, so you don't argue with them. You just give them what they want. Tell them what they want. Disrespecting them the whole time because you're suffering. These are stupid people. They don't know what they're doing, and your products are great, and you want them to buy, so you'll just do about anything. Keep them happy, and they'll buy your products. This is where a lot of salespeople get stuck forever, and these are the people who can give selling a bad name, because eventually this insincerity of it all twists you. The insincerity twists you over a long period of time, and then you start to overpromise and underdeliver. And that's when the joke about they're only lying when their lips are moving, and marketing knows when, and sales doesn't. There's almost as many salesman jokes as there are lawyer jokes because of this third level, which is inherently disrespectful to the customer, who you believe is stupid. So then eventually, sometimes, some of us, I think I did, made the transition from the third level to the fourth, which is nirvana. And I'm a little confused. Is nirvana in Zen, or is that in...
It's Buddhist.
So I'm mixing my religions. Anyway,
Well,
the,
that is Buddhist, so,
oh, so nirvana, you can reach...
yes.
Oh, good. All right. So, yeah, I worried about that when I wrote it down. So this fourth level is nirvana. It it's the highest level of selling consciousness. And it's the one in which your customers are experts. They're experts in what they need. You're an expert in what your product does. You're both experts. You respect them, they respect you. And your job as a salesman is to find the maximal overlap between what they need and what you have to offer. And to discover that maximal overlap through inquiry, through presenting, and more importantly, listening. This is the highest level, and this is the one I recommend you all immediately adopt. Because if you disrespect your customers, that is not the road to success. You also have to remember that, and this is in searching for that maximal overlap between what they want and what you have, is that they don't want mouse traps. They want fewer mice. So you have to discover what they really want as opposed to what they say they want, and then lead them to the conclusion, the happy conclusion that they need to buy lots of your product. Now the remainder of this, these collected thoughts on sales, I need to disclaim, because they come from my own experience, in a particular company that I worked on for 13 years. So the company in which I learned much of what I'm going to try to share in the next hour or so was not a 3-day startup. It was a 13-year startup. And it wasn't a website, because there weren't any websites then. It would have been a website if there'd only been a web, but there was no web, so I had to do something else. And most of the companies in this room are websites, and most of them are 3-day startups. That is, I went to 3-day startup. They actually built working demos of their products right there in a 3-day period. It was pretty amazing. Nothing that I sold could be done in 3 days. So I disclaim that. Plus, most of this experience comes from the 80s and 90s, and you haven't noticed it isn't the 80s or 90s anymore. So that's my disclaimer. So as I mentioned before, among the most frequent reasons for companies failing is engineers, my people, failing to respect salespeople. They believe that salespeople are lower than whale shit, below green slime, empty suits. And I meet these people over and over again, some clever young man who's invented something. The third thing he tells you is he hates venture capitalists, of course, but he also hates suits, and his company culture will not permit there to be empty suits in his company. His culture is going to be empty t-shirts. Another fact is that salespeople are generally paid more than engineers. And this is a very annoying thing.
In cash.
What's that?
In cash. No,
You're right, you're right.
total compensation.
Although salespeople sometimes have equity too. But no, you're right, the shift between cash and salespeople are generally compensated more on cash than engineers. But when you're starting a company before the equity is worth anything, it doesn't look good from the engineer's point of view, because the salespeople, especially successful salespeople, are paid more. It is a common phenomenon in Silicon Valley that the highest paid executive in the companies are salespeople. Higher than the CEO, higher than the founders. Now that's while the company's going like this. If a company's growth flattens out, the salesperson should not be the highest paid executive in the company. But it's when it's like this that all their upside compensation kicks in and they make a lot of money, and you're happy that they do, because they're bringing in orders, business. And the third thing is that engineers and salespeople are different life forms. They are both carbon-based, quite different. So it's not like we have to convince engineers to be salespeople or salespeople to be engineers. We just have to get them to work together on a team for things to work. So how important is selling and engineering? So engineers, and a lot of the people in this room are engineers, think that engineering is very important and sales is probably a secondary thing. So I've got some analysis here. This is the actual business model of 3Com Corporation in around 1990. It was about a $500 million a year company at that time. It hit $5 billion later. And in this is just one model. It doesn't have anything to do with any of the models of the companies in this room. And so let me go through it. And what I want to just focus on is where the engineering and where the sales is in this model, just to give you an idea of the relative importance.
Hey Bob, can you
Yeah.
pull it forward? I think they can't really see it on the left side, and maybe if you pull it towards the front, towards the desk, they will be able to. Is that helping us?
You guys see the whiteboard?
These numbers, by the way, are repeated in the Zenith selling paper, if you'd like to look at
That's
it.
for yours.
Better for us.
Yeah, I think it's
Better for us.
just all the time with that. I think maybe Germany had it slanted a little bit. I think so.
So let's say you sell $181 of the product. I don't think you should do that.
I agree.
There's wires involved. Let's say you sold $181 worth of product. And I choose the number 181 because most business models are based on net revenue being 100%. So this is gross revenue. This is the suggested retail price times the number of units sold is the $181. So the suggested is the sticker price times units sold. That's called gross revenue. This $81 is discounts to the channel of distribution. In the case, at this time, 3Com was in a two-step distribution, so we sold to distributors who sold to resellers and value-added dealers. So there was a street price, and then there's the suggested retail price, then there's the actual street price. The products get bought by the customers. Then there's distributors or wholesale price. So there's all the room for the discounts that support the companies in between that are distributing and selling the product. So the distributors and the retailers, they're paid out of that $81. They're paid for their buildings, and they're paid for their marketing efforts, they're paid for sales calls. That's where they get their money out of that $81. So now we're down to $100, which is called net revenue. This is sales and marketing here. From the $100, we spend 50 of it on building the product. And building it, let's see, 40 of that 50 is materials. Direct labor is $1 of the 50. And then there's a factor called overhead, materials and labor overhead. This is the people who manage the materials and manage the labor. A startling number here, by the way, is direct labor, 1% of sales. This is why they don't move companies to China because of direct labor rates. Because the direct labor is such a small fraction of building almost anything. There are other reasons, but that's not the reason. Then there's G&A, that's the suits, the non-selling suits. Then there's your corporate income tax, $7. $10 of profit, that's the compensation you pay capital. There's $18 of sales and marketing. So this is factory sales and marketing and field sales and marketing, $18 of the 100.
That's at the wholesale level?
Excuse me?
That's at the wholesale level? The 18?
No, that's $18 of expense out of $100 in revenue are paid to.
How is it different from the sales and revenue, sales that was in the 81?
Well, these people sell to those people.
Yeah.
And these people market, right here I'm lumping sales and marketing, they're all split them. But there's general marketing to give air cover to all this, but then there's marketing done here too. This is more, this is distributor level and retail level marketing. So this is sales and marketing here. And then there's $10 spent on engineering. So this is the 3Com business model around 1990. So $10 of net revenue, 10% of revenue is being spent on development engineering. Now, there's other engineering here. So this is development engineering, but there's some engineers in sales and marketing. They're generally called field engineers, pre and post sale. Engineers who help customers buy the product, and then engineers who help them use it later. And they're in the field, yes?
So it's like, that's what they call sales engineers.
Yes, sales engineer, field engineer,
Pre-sales.
application engineers, important pre and post. And so pre is part of the selling process and post is after they buy it.
I
general, and I'm waving my hands now, this business model spent 10 times more on sales and marketing than on engineering. 10 times more. That is how, at least in this case, that's how important sales is, at least financially. Any questions about that? 10 times. Yes.
Why'd you star the three of them?
Excuse me?
Why'd you star the three, like, sales and marketing, engineering, development, and the
I was
manufacturing?
trying to be fair, which is, I'm not really good at that, but I'm trying to signal where there are engineers hidden here. So there's engineers here, there's engineers here, there's also engineers in manufacturing. And there isn't a 9% of manufacturing overhead. And by the way, these engineers lord it over these engineers. And that's very unhealthy. Because these people make the company a lot of money. So these people look down on these people. So there's engineers elsewhere. At 3Com one day, we discovered that this attitude of the development engineers was so detrimental, morale destroying toward the manufacturing engineers. We gave them all a 25% raise and took them on a boondoggle and celebrated them. Because these people were taking points out of COGS and saving us hundreds of millions of dollars over several years by their work. And these people were just developing stupid products. Yes.
How much of that ratio between selling and the rest of the stuff do you think has to do with your product itself? Just kind of even that being a kind of
Yeah, those
standard
numbers
product.
vary from company to company. Microsoft spends more than 10% on engineering. However, our gross margin is 50% in this model. Microsoft's is 85%. So Microsoft sells software, so they're a completely different model. And then a website would have yet a different model.
Do you know what the variables are kind of between?
No, I can't tell you. I have a hunch, though, when you look at whatever a website's financial model is, I bet you sales and marketing is a multiple of engineering. That'd be my guess. Not in this case, because you don't have any revenue yet. But as soon as revenue starts flowing and you build out your companies with sales and marketing, then the percentage of your money going to sales and marketing will start to escalate compared to what's going into the whole. Yes?
You signed a question, Ernest, is it possible to grow a sizable company where each, segment of the team has mutual admiration and to some extent intimidation of the other, as opposed to one side looking down and kind of having areas above the other?
Well, yes, it is possible, but you have to pay attention. It changes over time. So in that month, we woke up and saw that morale in manufacturing was down because a bad attitude had been developed, so we moved to fix it.
Is that one event to actually fix it?
Yeah, in that case. There's also, I'm about to explain a little later, how sales and marketing look down at each other. And how do you fix that? I'm going to try to explain what the tension is between sales and marketing, because it's kind of funny. We all think, in fact, a lot of people mix them up. IBM calls it salespeople and marketing people. That doesn't help. They use a different terminology. But, sales and marketing is a natural adversarial relationship, but you have to be sure it doesn't spin out of control and become destructive. Just like this. These people have to turn their designs over to these people who have them made. And in a well-run company, these people don't accept the designs until they're finished. But these people think their designs are finished way before they're finished. So there's a natural adversarial relationship between manufacturing engineering and development engineering. So I suddenly became the head of sales and marketing of this company well before this event. In June of '82, and I held the job for 2 years. And I was an engineer, actually a research scientist and engineer. And now I was head of sales and marketing of my own company. Had been CEO, became head of sales and marketing. That tells you how desperate this company was. Our fume date was out there. We had no sales. So they gave me the job to get some sales. So I met the...
Was that your idea or somebody else's idea?
What's that?
Was that your idea or somebody else's idea?
It was somebody else's idea.
Did someone else become CEO or did you do that as CEO?
No, Bill Krause, I recruited to the company as president and COO, and he was much older and more experienced. So as we started to make Bill CEO, and Bob, since you're so good at selling, why don't you become head of sales and marketing? And that was not a terrible idea because we had no sales, and which is a problem. And I was well-known and had credibility and was the inventor of the technology, so I, as a matter of personal selling, had a big credibility step up over anyone else. And that's what we needed when you have zero revenue. But as I'll tell you in a moment, when you get $1 million a month in revenue, then you can't do that anymore. The actual professional salesman. So the first thing I learned about was President's Club. I had these three guys. Mike Halliburton was a professional sales guy from HP, and he became head of the Western region. Dave Depew was a production engineer in the company. Actually, I didn't go to Dave first. I went to Marlene first. Dave and Marlene was in marketing, and Dave was in manufacturing. And I said, we need salespeople now. Marlene, I'd like you to be East Coast Regional Sales Manager. She said, over my dead body, and she quit immediately. So then I went into manufacturing, and I found Dave Depew. I said, Dave, we don't need any production right now, but we do need sales, so why don't you be the Eastern Regional Manager? And he said yes, because he was single, and his father had been a salesman. Those are his qualifications. But this turned out to be a bad decision with a good outcome.
How big was the company at this point?
There were about 25 people and no revenue. And but there were products. We had products galore. And they later sold well. The funny one was Dave Colson, who had been in marketing. David is English, has an English accent. So I gave him the central United States and the rest of the world. Because he had an accent. So he could handle the rest of the world. And so we started selling, and it worked out. It turns out when you ask for the order, sometimes you get it. So we hadn't had a sales force until that time. And so we started asking, we started getting some business. And then we grew some more. We added a New England regional manager and a South, six of them. North, Central, East, Central, West, North and South, 6, plus Asia and Europe. And then we had a meeting, and they all started asking me about President's Club. Have you all, any of you heard of President's Club? Virtually every sizable company in the world has a President's Club, anybody with a sales force. And it's an annual event, so this is sales technology. It's an annual event which salespeople are invited to a boondoggle, Hawaii, Cayman Islands, Arizona. They're invited to bring their spices, and there's training involved during, like an hour in the morning. Then there's golf in the afternoon, or tennis, or boat trips, or scuba diving. And then in the evening there's parties where you give awards to various salespeople for their meeting quota. So this is the President's Club. That term is used over and over again. And it is absolutely essential to the functioning of the sales force, in particular the bringing of the spouses. Because you ask salespeople to be road warriors and to be out of town a lot and traveling all over the place, and you need the spouses on, the companions on your side. So you get them to come, and then you give awards to everybody in front of all their spouses, which is even better. Anyway, put the President's Club idea in the back of your head. It's obviously a technology that works. Hey, so let's go back to Dave Depew, who got the job as head of the Eastern region of the United States. He moved to Washington, D.C. immediately because he was single and could. Just went and started calling on everybody and started getting orders, and he succeeded. So his next job was head of the Northeast region. And he succeeded at that. And his next job was head of the Washington, D.C. area. And he succeeded at that. And his next job was head of OEM sales in the Washington, D.C. area. What do you notice about that orbit of? Well, it depends how you look. Looking from the top, he was getting demoted. Eastern, Northeastern, D.C. OEM. You look from the bottom, he was getting his compensation was doubling every year. So from the bottom, his territories were getting smaller, but the revenue from his territories was ballooning. So this is a common phenomenon in sales, where you, in the beginning, you have very few salespeople covering huge territories, but if you're successful, the amount of business coming from individual territories grows, and then you have to divide the territories. That's part of sales practice. Occasionally, salespeople will cry and whine because they want all the commissions that they're going to get from the larger territory, but that goes with the territory that they don't get to keep all those. Any questions yet? So, we gathered at Lake Tahoe that 6 salespeople plus the international guys and me at the house of one of the guys, and we had a problem. We weren't growing as much as we wanted, and all these salespeople had previously sold mini computers, which sold for $30,000 each, and their entire life model was organized around selling things for $30,000. The commissions they got added up. The trouble was they weren't selling any of the $30,000. The sales cycle was nearly infinite, and that was because we were selling Ethernet cards that plugged into personal computers, and there weren't very many of those. So it was very hard to sell a $30,000 item in an uncertain world. People didn't know what a LAN was, they didn't know what Ethernet was, they barely knew what a PC was. So that sales cycle, the time from you first call on a customer to when you actually get an order, was infinite. So in that meeting, which, by the way, my Mercedes, my poor Mercedes, was parked in the driveway at Lake Tahoe, and it was melting. The snow was melting, and all the snow on the roof slid off the roof and landed directly on my Mercedes and crushed it. I mean, crushed it so that the wheels were jammed up into the wheel well. Anyway, I digress. So we decided to sell kits. So we would, instead of going out selling $30,000 systems, having it as our sales objective to qualify customers to whom we could reasonably sell a $30,000 sale, we decided to sell 3-node kits. We sold these kits for $3,000, and of course the sales force was very nervous because they were used to getting commissions on $30,000 items, and 3 wasn't much of a commission. But guess what? The sales cycle collapsed, went to 0 a week, because it was easy to buy something for $3,000 and plug it into your 3 PCs. So we sold these 3 cards that you plugged into your PC, and then you ran cable. We sold you the cable too, that connected the 3 PCs, and the software that came on black floppy disks that allowed these machines to share disks, share a printer, and send email in the LAN. And we sold a bunch of them. And the next year, we came back to those customers for more orders, and they said the following horrible thing. The kits that you sold us did exactly what you said they would do. But that didn't turn out to be very useful. So our company's business started flattening. And in Silicon Valley, where you aim to go public someday, you don't flatten sales. You got to keep sales growing. So I went into what I would call a marketing trance. So here's the beginning of the distinction between sales and marketing. The salespeople had a problem, which is the customers didn't think what we were selling them was useful. And marketing needed to give sales a tool to turn that around. So I figured the following thing out, which you may have seen before. If I could find the red marker. I knew that local area networks were useful. Why did I know that? Does anyone, can you guess?
Creative people talk.
What's that? How did I know? For sure.
Because you created it, so you believed in it.
Because you were using them? Were you like actually using them in your company?
Because I had lived, no, that's getting close though. I had worked at Xerox for 8 years where we had local area networks all over the place, and they were the cat's pajamas. So I knew that they were useful. I just needed to explain why they weren't useful to my customers. And that's when I made a slide. When I say I make a slide, I want you to know it was not a PowerPoint. Because PowerPoint wasn't invented until the late 80s, and this is the early 80s. this slide, which noticed that the cost of a network grew linearly with the number of cards that you bought from me. And you were down here at 1, 2, 3. But the value of the network related to how many connections could be made among the PCs. And that number looked like this, quadratic, n squared. And here was the critical mass point. And that was about 30. Number 30 familiar? $30,000, 30 nodes. These nodes sold $1,000 each. As long as you were here, you were below critical mass, and the value of the network was below its cost. But if you could get above critical mass, then eventually you would love your network. You would have a network effect, Metcalfe's law, as it became known many years later. So I made this slide, a marketing tool. This is what marketing does. They make tools, and then I gave this slide to each of my salespeople, and they went out, and whenever they called on customers, they presented this bullshit. Remember, I made the distinction earlier between an exaggeration and the lie. This is high concept. It's not a lie, because I knew from experience that these networks are valuable, and this explanation was plausible. So my sales force went out and delivered this high concept, and a wonderful thing happened. Customers started buying $30,000 worth of our product.
So you sold them for $3,000 worth of stuff, and they came back and said, this is useless, and then you came back and sold them 30 times, or 10 times that?
Well, you skipped something. Some marketing got done. This is marketing. And so the marketing plus the sales. Sales force goes out, gives presentations, goes to customers, says, yeah, we got this network. It was called the systemic value of the network. You can get the slides on the web. And it says the systemic value of the network, n squared, and son of a bitch, they believed us. They bought these 30-node networks. And then, as predicted, the networks proved useful. So the company went public in March of '84 as a result. That's marketing. And sales is what those guys took those slides out, visited all their customers, and told that story.
But part of the best part, right, is that it was created for marketing, but nobody thinks of it as marketing. But I don't think that's, a funny thing to say that, because it turns out it is a helpful framework for thinking about other things. And whoever marketed it, people took it as fact, not as spin.
Well, I use the phrase high concept. It was high concept in that it didn't relate to product features.
Yeah.
It didn't say the cards really are really fast or cheap or take less space or cooler or whatever. This is above product features, and it's a concept sell, which is this worked. This is why Ethernet took off. It's because of that's not the only part, but that was an important marketing step. Yes?
So I guess, did you coin Metcalfe's law?
No. So the original slide, which is available on the web, you can Google it up. If you were to open your computer now in the middle of my lecture, you could do that, but I don't recommend that. What was your question? So it was just a slide. Then in 1995, which is like 15 years later, I was interviewed by a guy named George Gilder, who had roughly coined the term Moore's Law. Heard of Moore's Law? That same guy. So in I don't think he coined it exactly, but he popularized it in his book, Microcosm, which was about Intel. He then wrote a book in the late 90s called Telecosm, and this was the law that he named, Metcalfe. So you're not really allowed to name a law after yourself, I guess unless you're you.
So, I want to snuck a look at the chart. There's no units on the dollar value, but you said that the break-even point is $30,000, right? Because it's 30 units. You get that. So, didn't people
this is a vision thing.
Yeah, I get it.
And someday, when I have time, I'm going to try to go back and quantify this. I like to say the thing that Moore's Law and Metcalfe's Law have in common is they both begin with M.
I don't know if you're gonna get to answer this or not. What's the most successful product you ever sold in pre-com?
The Etherlink, which was,
I feel like I could spit off a model number. I would say right about the tip of my tongue, because I was buy some of these CDs.
3C500.
Yes, that was it. Like 3C905 maybe, like it was like maybe,
Well, there got to be lots
that was
of.
probably mine. There was like one that was like that was it. It was like,
Well, the 3C100 was our Ethernet transceiver.
I think I remember a lot of
3C500.
3C905s.
I don't remember that. So I'd like to return to that point in a moment. I'd like to make a few other points. So I became head of sales and marketing for 3Com for 2 years. I took revenue from $0 to $1 million a month. And then we shifted gears, and that term, shifted gears, is the one I'm trying to sell you. Because then, up until then, selling had been a personal selling matter. I could get inside, I invented this stuff. I went on many sales calls with our salespeople. But then we started having lots of salespeople, and we needed sales compensation plans with some sophistication, territory management, all the technologies of sales, none of which I've actually mentioned here, but there's a lot of them. It became time to shift gears. So Bob stopped being head of sales and marketing, and along came Mike. So Mike, who ran the Western region, then became head of sales globally. And Mike took us from $1 million a month to $5 million a month. And then he, like me, redlined. He was successful, but he redlined. That's the internal combustion engine analogy there. So when you redline, what do? You shift gears. So along came Chuck. We recruited Chuck from Wang Laboratories, which was busily self-destructing at that moment. So we picked a really cool guy, and he took us from $5 million a month to $25 million a month. This is a guy who knew how to sell, market, and he was our first combined sales and marketing guy. Mike was just sales, Chuck was sales and marketing. So $5 million to $25 million, and guess what he did at $25 million a month? He redlined. And so we recruited Bob Finocchio. He took us from $25 million a month to $100 million a month, or more, shifting gears. These people all succeeded at selling, but they redlined. That is, selling, the point here is that the selling technology required at various scales is such that it's very hard to find a person who can operate effectively at all the scales. So whereas I succeeded at the first $1 million a month, I was a horrible choice for going after that because of the new technologies that came along. Yeah.
As you shifted gears, well, except for you, did you fire them or demote them or just leave them where they were?
I think previously, maybe I made the point earlier that self-awareness is a very hard thing to come by. And so we had to we went to me and we said, Bob, I didn't get fired.
Yeah, of course.
I was chairman of the board, the largest shareholder, they fired me, but I took another job. And that's when we got Mike. Then when Mike redlined, he went back to Western Regional Manager, but the Western Region was huge by then. Chuck stormed out in a huff, and Bob Finocchio eventually became president of the company. Not CEO, but president. Yes?
How did you determine when someone redline? And when they were just like, I don't know, hit a wall, but they were going to go for it.
Some of it, sales is very numerical. So the redlining looks like this.
Can't really see it.
Think of a curve sort of flattening out. That's what you would see. This is redlining, meaning the growth stops.
I'm still kind of confused. So you just brought in somebody else and suddenly they were like, what curve? And just kept going up. Like, I don't get it. Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, because, for example, I didn't know how to do sales comp. I didn't know how to do territory, I'm just listing a few, territory management. I didn't know how to do contracts with territory commissions. There's a lot of technical things that experienced salespeople know how to do. So suddenly, I had a bunch of salespeople who wanted double commissions. You know, you get the design win here, but the production one here, that both salespeople show up and they want to be commissioned on the whole thing. Well, there's a way of doing that. There's a way of doubling commissioning people, and then you can't afford to double commission them forever, but you can. So that's one thing that salespeople know how to do, how to set up comp plans and handle double commissioning in a transitional way. I didn't have any idea how to do that. So the machine started running well again after Mike came in. And then Mike ran into the trouble that he had been a mini computer salesman, and we were going into consumer retail distribution. He didn't know anything about retail. But Chuck knew about retail, so things took off again. So it's like that. You flatten out and then you resume your, if it works out, you resume your growth.
It kind of looks like if you continue that, it becomes almost a step function. And are those steps, those inflection points, areas where sales takes on a greater level of sales management and less of actual sales?
Well, for the leader,
Yeah.
the salespeople are still selling, but now you have more hierarchy and you have this refined, much more sophisticated sales management going into the executive level. So Chuck was VP of sales and marketing, and he had a worldwide sales manager and Mark Homburg.
And is that something you can preemptively identify? Can you get a sense
Before
of your,
redlining?
yeah, can you get a sense of your organization that once we get to a particular size and maybe have an idea of it's a $20 million range between here and here, there's going to have to be a shift where this individual who's currently in that spot is either going to have to get some sort of developmental work to prepare him or herself for that next level, or we're going to have to start working now to find that next guy so that we don't waste 6 months flatline.
You've skipped another remedy, which is to recruit someone capable of handling the next phase, but they have to settle with doing the current phase. So Chuck, you run a $1 billion business, Wang, we'd like you to run a $25 million business here, but it's going to grow, and even though now we have a non-divisional company with one product line, we're going to have a division. That's another complexity that creeps in when you end up with a multi-divisional company selling multiple product lines into various channels of distribution. How do you keep that all straight? Chuck knew how to keep that all straight. So we could have tried to recruit Chuck earlier had we been more prescient. But that's another remedy, is to hire ahead, recruit ahead. Nick?
I guess other than recruiting ahead, is there anything else you can do, say at the very beginning, to potentially increase your spot where you're going to redline?
Well, I think I just answered that.
Well, yeah, is
By
there anything
recruiting a
else?
more capable person. But remember, we're looking back on this. In this room, we're now looking back. But we're not looking back at the time. I mean, you don't know when these things are going to happen. So for example, we could not have, we didn't certainly, and I argue, we could not have anticipated the arrival of the personal computer retail channel that blossomed in the early 80s. And that was perfect for us. We weren't selling in retail. And suddenly business land, computer land, zero, a little bit like Apple stores, only for PCs generally. They weren't Apple stores then. And so we realized that we needed to sell our product through retail. And that just was a development that happened in real time. We couldn't have anticipated that. So the guy we recruited to head, Mike, had no knowledge of retail sales. So we went out and got Chuck, who did.
Wait, you saw retail in the late 80s?
Early 80s.
Early 80s? Retail?
Retail, yeah. Businessland was our principal customer. That was a company founded exactly in time to sell our products. And the transformation there that made it work, and this was another step function. We had initially started selling Ethernet to people who had PCs. Imagine what happened when people started buying PCs with Ethernet in it. Completely different sales situation. So by getting into retail, people selling PCs, it became a checkbox item. You're buying a PC, you want a printer, you want a keyboard, you're, oh, Ethernet, yeah. As opposed to calling him son of a bitch and convincing him that he needed to buy a card now, open up his machine and stick it in. So getting to retail with that checkbox capability
salesman you got in as compared to, say, a change in business model or your expansion of products?
You mean how much is attributable to the sales leaders that I just talked about?
Yeah, so Chuck and Bob and,
Well, that's a fair question. It wasn't entirely due to that.
right,
So the market was changing. That's a point I'll get to in a minute. And we were developing new products that were more attractive.
right,
So it's hard to tease it apart.
okay.
But there was a redlining phenomenon. And this resumption of growth phenomenon occurred repeatedly each of those times. Sometimes it doesn't occur. Sometimes you bring in a new head of sales and things continue going down, and then there's a lot of recriminations, and then the sales guy asks the same thing. He says, the products suck. I'm a great salesman. Your products suck. Fix them. And then it continues down, and then there's a bankruptcy here. So shifting gears. Now, when we met, I'm going to call for a break in a moment. You guys ready for a break? I just want, while on the topic of shifting gears, there's another sense of shifting gears, and it had to do with go-to-market. And imagine the impact that this go-to-market, let's call it the uses of the products, as changes over time, shifting of gears. So the initial use of Ethernet, the initial one, was on mini computers. So our first Ethernet cards were big cards sold into mini computers, and there the purpose was for these machines to allow people to log into each other and to transfer files from each other. So that was the first application, login and file transfer. And we sold hundreds of those, including, but then some workstations came along, and then we sold larger numbers of hundreds per month. And we felt really good about that. Then we came out into the PC market, and a new set of applications appeared, which we call PFMTS, print, file, mail, terminal access, and stubs, or the modern word for stubs would be APIs. So our software had APIs. So there the application, as I mentioned earlier, was sharing a printer, sharing a disk, exchanging mail within the LAN only. Terminal access to the mainframes that still hung around. And then this APIs, or stubs as we call them. And that led to the next phase, where the principal use of all this gear was multi-user applications in businesses. So people took the stubs, the APIs, and built multi-user accounting systems, various forms of workflow for businesses, and that drove business. And then around 1994, the principal reason to buy an Ethernet card was for internet access, starting around the public offering of Netscape in 1994. Well, those are different uses of the product, and we had, at a marketing level, had to come up with different tools, different stories, different, and then to some degree, different salespeople. Like the shift into PFMTS brought Chuck in, who knew how to sell retail, because that was a retail thing. So there's the shifting of gears of people, and there's also the shifting of gears to go to market. You go to market with one idea of what you're selling, but then that evolves with the market size.
So you just equated marketing with stories. Would that be a good, I mean, not like I'm telling stories, but like narratives. Would that be a good description?
Well, this is a story. This is a story about how, if you buy more of my product, good things are going to happen to you. It's a story about why you were dissatisfied with the product. It answers that. It gives you a reason to buy more of my product. So it's a story, or a story, yes. I don't use the word stories pejoratively. Why don't we take a break?